Greetings and welcome to The Candidate, the show that tries to examine each presidential candidate as they get into the running for the August 2023 elections. As we all know, the elections are one of the most important events in our national calendar, as it is the event that determines the very future of our very beloved country. Now, as we go through each candidate, it is your responsibility to listen closely, listen attentively, listen questioningly, as you listen to who might actually be your future leader. And to start us off in this brand new show, we have in the studio Mr. Wilbert Archibald Mubaiwa, who is Engineer Wilbert Archibald Mubaiwa, who's here to tell us a little bit more about why he should be named president. Mr. Mubaiwa, thank you for coming into our show today. We have two standard questions. The first one, as you heard when I just introduced just your title, is because I would like for you to introduce to Zimbabwe your party and what you are running for.
Thank you, Kuda. My name is Engineer Wilbert Archibald Mubaiwa, President of the National People's Congress, abbreviated to NPC. I am wanting to run for president, and I want to run for president, and I want to be the president. Why I'm saying I want is because there is a time between now and the actual election. God can do anything. I represent a group of politicians, not by age, but by way of thinking. I represent a group of politicians that believe that the most important thing is the direction in which the country must go, is the progress that the country must make. My background has something to do with it. First of all, my biggest background is that I'm an African and a black Zimbabwean. I believe we owe it to ourselves to take this country from wherever it may be at any given point to a place where you think it should be. And that's what I represent. I'm a soldier by training for a very brief period, an engineer by training and experience, a banker and a businessman. I went into politics because I had seen that we are not focusing on the country. Our political dynamics don't look at the country. They look at individuals. So I have seen since 1995, during the time of Tekere, individuals defining each other, telling each other who they are, the size of his head, his behavior, his what. And I'm saying that's not the country. That's an individual. Individuals will come and go, but the country will remain. So the National People's Congress objective is to focus entirely on the direction in which this country must go in order to transform the lives of everyone, in order to restore the lives of all the people. There is no doubt that when you drive around the country, when you travel in the region and outside, we seem to be like a people who have lost their dignity. And we appear like people who have lost our pride, because sometimes we talk ill of ourselves. When you talk ill of your country, you are talking ill of yourself. That's someone who has lost pride. So I thought we needed to restore our dignity. I therefore say it must be a duty. We said it must be our duty. It is our responsibility. And we must be committed to it to make sure that we move the country forward.
Now, in terms of being a political candidate, you are relatively new to the political scene. You are also somewhat unknown to the political scene. Do you believe that coming into the national focus at such an advanced stage towards the electoral process, that you've given yourself sufficient time to be taken seriously as a candidate in this election?
At a human level, maybe not. But at the level of wisdom, the conceptualization of life, the spiritual side, because we don't decide what happens to us. One day you wake up with a good contract and you think you're very smart. No, I think there are many other forces at the end. My decision to get into politics happened very late in my life. It happened when I was 55. I am now 60, turning 61 this coming August. There is a reason for anything and the time that it takes. Yes, I am late in terms of the actual number of days that I participate. But I'm not late in terms of the time that I've looked at this country, analyzed it, analyzed my own life, analyzed events that have taken place from the time active politics began in this country. Active before and after the liberation struggle and now. I've been in politics. So what I need to give to the people now is the knowledge, the wisdom that I've developed over the years. And I believe people are intelligent by nature. Everyone has got their own intelligence, especially when it comes to one's country. So I believe it will not take people 2 months to understand that my message is right.
Okay, so your message is very spiritual. You run on a very spiritual platform. And some of the needs that we have in Zimbabwe, although we are a very spiritual country and we do recognize the need for spiritual guidance, we do also have material needs which need to be spoken to. We need a robust economy, a fixed infrastructure, a health sector that can actually take care of the ills that are happening in our country. Does your spiritual message or your strong spiritual grounding help the average Zimbabwean speak to understand how you're going to be addressing those issues as the president?
The spiritual side has nothing to do with the practical. I'm only talking about it because that's what caused me to be where I am. But the purpose of my being here is to solve the country's problems. Because I believe in this country. Because I believe, that's the spiritual side, is the belief in the country. And the belief in the people, that they will realize that I stand for the good of this country. Our philosophy is Ubuntu. And I have brought it in as an ideology because I didn't want it to work on an ideology that I've seen in a textbook, whose origins I don't know. You talk of Marxism, you talk of no, I don't know the origins of those. But I know Ubuntu because I know from early childhood it represents development without boundaries. In your local language, you probably call it Nimbe or Huma or Ilima in Ndebele. That basically means that whatever we do, we must consider others. Whatever we do, we must never leave anyone behind. Whatever we do, we must never leave any region or province or neighboring country behind. That's Ubuntu. So I'm saying we are bringing in a philosophy where we need development without boundaries, where development must take place elsewhere. The only consideration being the needs of that particular place, being the opportunities in that particular place. So in theory and in practice, what we want to do is to bring opportunities to every Zimbabwean. Opportunities whose uptake is assisted by government. Opportunities whose presence is given by the conditions of the country. But my role would be to show people those opportunities. And their role becomes to choose an opportunity of their choice. And my next role would be to assist them to grow in their opportunity of choice. And it doesn't matter whether they are a young man, a woman, or a man. We are just worried about what you want to do for this country. And as a government, we must help you to achieve that. There is no country in the world whose people will grow to be big business people without the input of the nation.
So there's an understanding in the global sense of politics that every country goes through different periods and there are leaders for every time. You know, we've got great leaders who we know who are wartime leaders. We've got leaders who are resurgence leaders. There were leaders in times of prosperity. In your estimate, what time are we in Zimbabwe, and what kind of leader do we need right now?
I acknowledge what you're talking about, but a leader is for any time. The reason why, for example, Winston Churchill was seen as a wartime leader, it's because he existed during wartime. But I'm sure if he had existed even in a peaceful time, he would have grown the economy. So a leader must be able to adapt to any situation. But you can't be in war and peace at the same time. So you can't then say this one is for peacetime, this one is for wartime. No, leaders should be able to take you through. As Engineer Mubaiwa, I'm a leader who can take you through all that. But for now, I'm coming in to make sure that Zimbabwe starts to grow. Zimbabwe begins to grow. I'm calling it a Restart Zimbabwe program. Why I'm calling it a restart? We started in 1980 We did a lot of things. We were very successful in a lot of things. But there is one thing that we didn't do, which I think is the one thing that is remaining. We did not plan this country to develop it for black people, for people who were not in the economy in 1980. Why do I say that? It's because when you look at the country, our industrial set up, it's exactly what it was in 1980. Nothing has changed. Willowville existed. Granite Side existed. We did not create opportunities for the African, for the black men who came into the economy in 1980. We participated in the economy that was left by the white people, and we are still participating in that. The opportunities are still the same. The industrial space is still the same. I want now to create industrial space, manufacturing space, retail space, commercial space for the African man. For people who are not in the economy at the time, we want to put them into the economy now and into the future. That's the only thing that I think was not done by Robert Mugabe and those who came after him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mubaiwa. We're going to take our first break, but when we come back, we want to now start examining some of your more intentions for the different demographics that are in Zimbabwe. Welcome back to The Candidate. In the studio, we have engineer Wilbert Mubaiwa, who is the leader of the NPC, the National People's Congress, who's been outlining his plans for a better Zimbabwe, a Zimbabwe that is inclusive of those who had initially not been included in 1980, but are now there and need to start benefiting. Mr. Mubaiwa, in terms of talking about people you are wanting to benefit, people you are wanting to get into a better place. As a traditional man, as a spiritual man, one of the challenges that we've had historically is that from a demographic standpoint, women have come second fiddle when it comes to issues of empowerment, issues of prosperity. What are your plans to be able to advance women so that they are able to also have a seat at the table in your government, and also to be able to have the benefits that you've been touting about at a national level?
When I look at people, I normally don't want to categorize them into men, women, or youth. Because the moment you identify someone as a woman, that's when discrimination begins. I want to look at people as people, but I'll focus on women because you've asked it so. My opinion and my knowledge of the role of women is different from what I hear. Women were the custodians of every home before colonization. We went out, kumarimuka kunovima, and they looked after the home. We came to so they are capable people. They have always been capable. That role was taken away from them during the period we were colonized, because the men then became employed in Harare, and the woman was disadvantaged at home. And because the man was bringing in money to the woman, she played second fiddle. And when we became independent, we did not reverse that to give women their actual role. They have always been the women, the people who are behind the development of a nation. During our time as Africans, everyone who goes to and you will discover that women are very important. But they are important not necessarily now because of their women, but because they are human beings. So the starting point is you are dealing with a human being. Wherever I've worked, I've never identified someone as a woman or as a man, because I know the moment I do that, I begin a process of segregation. I see certain opportunities for women and for men. No, for me, a woman must be allowed to take any opportunity of every nature that he or she likes. But because we've had a period of disadvantage, especially after independence, there is a need to put, when we put opportunities in front, to leave a certain quota for women in every field. We will not choose a field for a woman. Each individual woman must choose her own field. And our role as government is to help that individual who is a woman in the area that she has chosen. If she wants to be a president, let's help her. If she wants to be the owner of a huge brewery that competes with the Delta, let's help here. But it must be a field of choice. Not what we say, this is for women, this is for youth. How do you know that? Maybe the youth that you are giving a small plot to do vegetables is a big businessman who wants to run a big brewery, and we are keeping them down. So we believe people must make choices for themselves. But we believe because the youths have no capacity, they don't have security when they start business, they become a special group only from that point of view.
If you could, we are going to get to youth, but I'd like for you to conclude on women first, so that we are not blending people's
That's
issues.
okay, although the argument is the same. We are going to allow them to choose areas of their own choice, areas of interest, not because of women, but because they are good business people. They are good leaders who have chosen their areas of capacity and capability. And our role is simple, to help them achieve their goals. If it means providing working space, in this case, because we were not part of the industry, and they must want to go into industry, government must provide working space, which we never provided since independence. We were going into built-up areas. We were going into...
How are you planning to do that, to provide that space? Because what you have said is very important to establish as a grounding, to say you recognize the need for inclusion. But now what we need is to advance that point. What are you practically going to do? Because inclusion is already an understood point. What we lack is the steps. How are you going to do it?
The starting point for me is we must know every growth point. Because we defined it as a growth point, we must make sure it grows. And we must make sure at every growth point, we have got industrial space. We have got commercial space. And at every growth point, including Harare, it's a growth point, although a big one, we must provide that space and maybe build it up to a certain level. Maybe provide what we normally call factory shells at government cost. And I think it's doable. If I assume 4 factory shelves of 1,500 square meters each at every growth point, it means we're talking about 600 to 800. That will cost about 480 million. Well, let's provide this in the first year, first 6 months. And then if you want to go to good where there are now 4 factory shelves and you want to manufacture clothing, you go and occupy that space.
So you want to suggest we put 480 million, we inject 480 million into
starting businesses for all our people.
Where's this money coming from?
We already have it.
And
we are simply moving. It's a question of prioritization.
Right.
We are helping industry. During the time of Goni and others, you remember what was called the money that was being used by companies that were under distress. That money. And throughout, if you look at our budget, it is good money to help industrialists and so forth. I am saying the starting point is not to help a mature company like Delta, like Olive. No. I am saying the starting point is to help a new company that is starting, because it's quicker for it to start producing.
But would you not argue that, helping the Deltas who are already in a position to be able to employ hundreds, if not thousands of employees, is probably a smart place to put the money, considering that we have such high unemployment rates?
Delta will never be able to play an additional people because they've already matured. They replace those who die and those who retire. The only way, if you go to any country, Japan, and you look at their research station, the only way to increase employment is to go to young people who can start new industries that are more mobile. If you create 1 million of them and each one employs 4 people, you have 4 million people. If you get 500,000 of them across the country, each one employs 10, you have got 5 million people. The starting point is always new industries, never the old ones. So old ones have a bad habit. They give the CEO a huge car, this one. They will continue to fund those bad habits. New companies have no habits. They create them, and you can manage them. So we've got a department which we call human development and employment creation. That's what it will do. You can't teach Delta. They think they must teach you.
So let's talk about opportunities for growth as you are mentioning them. When you see Zimbabwe and the plethora of issues that we have, where do you say is the first place we need to improve and fix? You become president, It's your first 90 days. Where are you starting?
I don't talk of 90 days. I talk about a reasonable period, 6 months. 90 days is American, so we don't want to follow
180 days.
Yes.
Okay.
The starting point is exactly what I have said. We have already identified. For example, when you go to Gokwe, they've got a lot of cotton. So if you are going to plan for industry in Gokwe, start with cotton. If you are going to start for industry in Marsh East, Marsh Central, and so forth, start with food industries, because the food is produced very close to that. If you are going to start in Matabeleland, look at what they naturally have. It's a cattle. It's a lot of animals in the game parks. Start with your leather industry. I'm just giving an example. And that's what I think I will do. So when we provide opportunities, you will choose whether you want to do your leather in Matabeleland or what. But we advise, the best place where your input materials are abundant is Matabeleland. If you are going to go into sugar production, who will suggest the best place for you is Masvingo, because a lot of sugar cane is produced there. Let's make sure your input materials are close by, and we can assist you. We can advise, but the individual is given the right to say, I want to produce oil at this point. I want to produce sugar.
Are you saying that that is not already existing?
It's not.
I think a lot of people can say that, but the challenge is resources to be able to implement those dreams.
I already explained resources. When I say the starting point, government must provide. Land belongs to us. We have just not planned it. We don't know where Harare is going to be in the next 50 years, and yet we have land, even though it's individual farms. But government has got access and the right of access to those farms. What we have not done is to say, where should the next industry for Harare be? We have not done that since 1980.
Right.
Where should the industry from Mutare be? That's what where we are going to start. Provide an entire space where we say, this is our new industrial area. And the government is going to start in Harare by putting in 50 factory shelves. And those youths, or whatever, or women, must choose what they want to do. And they can go into an appropriate area as planned by the officials.
Thank you, Mr. Mubaiwa. When we come back, we will now take a final close look at the candidate himself. Welcome back to The Candidate. We are having a thoroughly good conversation with presidential hopeful, Engineer Wilbert Mubaiwa, who's been talking a lot about how he's going to advance the agenda of several key demographics, women, youth, so on and so forth. And now we're getting into a more closer look at the candidate themselves. Mr. Engineer Mubaiwa, sorry, apologies, I keep calling you
it's
Mr.
Okay. Mr. is good enough.
Engineer Mubaiwa, you are almost 61.
Yes.
You haven't really dabbled that long into politics.
Yes.
Why do you feel now you are qualified or capable of taking on such a massive role like president when previously you haven't taken on any other legislative positions?
First of all, it's not a massive role. It's a very simple role. Because all you need to do is provide wisdom, provide support to the people who need the support and the wisdom. These are the manufacturers, these are the universities. You need to give them that wisdom to move ahead. And secondly, the reason why I didn't participate until now, somehow at some point in my life, I was convinced that everything was going well. Because when people spoke in the early part of independence, even the latter part, I could see hope. I had something to look forward to. But over the last 10 years, when people speak, when industrialists speak, when the so-called businessmen speak like myself speak, when the politicians speak, including the presidents and the leaders of political parties, I have not seen hope in their words. So I want to bring that hope. But the most important thing, I have seen a lot of fights between politicians, internal fights, fights between political parties, between members of the same party. And I've said this is not the way to build this country. That's why I said let's move with Ubuntu. so that we should have no time to fight Kuda because of his ideology. I should have no time to fight the president, Comrade Mnangagwa, because of his ideology and the way he thinks. That's the way he thinks. You don't want to change it. I don't want to fight Chamisa because of the way he does his own things. I must simply come onto the scene and say, this is what I want to do for the country. Because that's what is important. What you want to do for the country.
What role does knowledge, wisdom, kindness, love, these are the messages you're spreading, do for a businessman who's trying to, or a businesswoman who's trying to keep profitable with a rising inflation? Would you come to that person who's needing tangible moves to be able to continue in business with wisdom, knowledge, and sentiment?
Yeah, when the situation is as it is, yes, you should. But what I'm saying is we don't want it to come to that position. We want it to move away from that position of high inflation, unstable interest rates, unstable because you don't know what they are. One gets 15%, the other 5%, and unknown, and you also of unknown exchange rates. You don't want that situation. So what we are coming to do is to reverse them. And I am saying the starting point is production. Let's focus on production. The exchange rates manage themselves. Once you produce, you don't worry about going to the reserve bank and talking about what you're going to do to improve this and this. No, just produce. Those things will manage themselves. The moment you start trying to control an exchange rate, it means there is something else that has not been done properly. It's that you must look at, not the exchange rate. Why are you worried about the exchange rate?
So where do you sit on the conversation about improving the Zim dollar versus the going back to dollarizing? That is a very key issue that we have in our economy right now. A lot of people are advocating for re-dollarizing.
So in that situation, you look for the US dollar and use it. But the ideal situation is when a country uses its own currency. But for you to use your own currency, you must have a support base. That's why you must start producing. That's why Guruwe must produce. That's why Gutu must produce. That's why Mutare must produce. And these must export to Harare. Once you do that, you have no need for foreign currency. The reason why we need foreign currency at the moment, because everything, in fact, 80% of our needs are imported. Go to your beer. In a beer, 50% to 80% is imported. That's why you need for the foreign currency. That's why your exchange rate then becomes important. That's why the government then gets worried and they must manage it. But the government must go and say, okay, we don't have beer. We are importing it. Let's facilitate production of beer. You used to produce beer. You were a manufacturer of beer. I was a manufacturer. Everyone was a manufacturer of beer in this country. Do you agree with me? Because every household produced dairy and so forth. So we had no problem. Everyone produced bread. But today bread goes to Pinga from Harare. That's where our problem is. That's why I'm saying let's produce everywhere.
So how do you make a connection? Because your message is relevant and as has been heard of quite a number of times, going back to our basics, taking time to invest in what we learned in our history and continuing that lineage of self-development, self-production. But times have significantly changed since then. Not all houses are producers. Some houses have academics, other houses have, unfortunately, unemployed people. How do you make that connection of that old-time message with what we are actually going through today in 2023?
I am only reversing the trend. When you look at Harare, there are so many residential areas that have been produced, and people will not take time to notice this. But there are no industries. The difference between the old is that we were talking about it. Now I am saying, you don't have to worry about working space because we don't know you don't have capital. Government have been talking about it, but they have not facilitated it. They thought an individual would. No individual can facilitate business growth in this country. I must, as the president. So that's why I want to go and build for you there. And I tell you, a lot of people would be very happy if they find working space. Today you find them working at their verandas in Glenview, in Budiriro, in Zengeza and so forth. Do you know the reason? They have nowhere to work from. So all I'm saying, let me provide working space for these people, and they can go and start producing. They will employ 2 or 3 more people. The connection is very simple because it's natural to them. That's what they've been asking for. When they say we have no capital, Because to get land, you find an acre a council is selling an acre for $100,000. That's madness. That's state land. For me, I think land must be given to the people initially. For the first 5 years, they don't have to pay for it. Because it's our land anyway. It's lying idle. We can leave it lying idle for centuries. Nothing will happen. But there's nothing wrong in giving it to Kuda for the first 5 years without him paying for it. It was idle anyway. He starts producing, and after a year or so, he sells to his local community. He employs 2-3 more people in his local community. That's where I'm coming from. It's nothing new. This land has been there. It's ours.
A wholesome message indeed. As we're about to close, if you look at that camera over there, that is your eye into the nation. For the final bit of our interview, I'd like for you to have the floor to be able to address your potential future citizens as to why you should be their president. The floor is yours.
As I said before, my name is Engineer Wilbert Mubaiwa. I am running for president. I have seen what has happened since 1980. I was a teenager then. I have grown into an educated man, if degrees mean education. I'm an engineer. I have a certificate in military engineering. I have a certificate in banking, and I have another one in management. So that I have gotten, and thanks to the liberation of this country. But I'm disappointed when I see lots of us move the streets with nothing to do. I'm disappointed when I see so many people with degrees, which they think is knowledge, move around with nothing to do. So we have got the resources, the people are there, the opportunities are there. Because any country that is not fully developed has more opportunities than the developed country. So I am coming in to bring those opportunities to your doorstep so that you can choose your own opportunity and we can help you to achieve your objectives as a citizen, as a businessman, as a researcher, or whatever you want to be. But the starting point is Ubuntu. I must realize you exist because I exist. And I must know I exist because you exist. We need each other to survive. If I go back to our basic language, Ubuntu stands for development without boundaries. Kuvakwa kusina mugano. Ilima is very important. Nimbe is very important. Umwa is very important. It's about not leaving you behind. When I finish my field and you don't have the means to plow your own field, I come and help you. That's what we must do. But the starting point is government. The government must help its citizens to become big business people. And no country exists without its own big business people.
Engineer.
The time is now. Vote NPC.
The time is now. Vote NPC. Thank you very much, Engineer, for coming onto our show and highlighting some of the key aspects of your platform, as well as educating Zimbabweans on why ultimately they should vote for you.
Thank you.
And there you have it, the NPC, National People's Congress, headed by Engineer Wilbert Archibald Mubaiwa. A wholesome message, taking us back to basics, Ubuntu, being together, thinking of each other, healing and not fighting, being able to speak about progress, growth, and not squabbling over minor details. This is a message that I feel is important for our nation to hear, but it's also about you to determine whether that is the sort of leadership, that is the sort of platform that you will hinge your bet on. Until next time, this has been The Candidate. My name is Kudamangwe. Hope you enjoyed.